I was perpetually balancing employment, coursework, and struggling to stay afloat. On most occasions, I could barely find time to consume a decent meal. My evenings were spent at a cafe, weekends at a bookshop, and between these jobs, I squeezed in study sessions wherever possible. My existence felt mechanical, grinding through each day repeatedly. Some evenings brought tears of frustration as I questioned whether the effort was worthwhile, but whenever I considered giving up, my father's words echoed in my mind, reminding me of my original purpose. While that money may have been taken from me, my resolve remained untouchable. The challenge extended beyond financial pressure to include the emotional burden of feeling completely abandoned by my own relatives. Neither Sandra nor Ian ever reached out to me, not even once. In reality, they behaved as though I was invisible. Sandra continued hosting her small gatherings, boasting about Ian and his grand ambitions, while I survived on instant ramen and struggled to cover rent. I'll always remember encountering Ian at the market. He was selecting premium steaks while my cart contained canned soup and generic bread. He glanced at me with a smirk, saying, "Still playing that whole impoverished student role, huh? You could have made things easier by simply making the right choices." I remained silent, not trusting myself to respond without losing control. During my sophomore year, circumstances began to improve slightly. I secured a paid position with a local advertising company, which felt like salvation. The compensation wasn't substantial, but it allowed me to reduce one part-time job while providing real-world experience. For the first time, I felt like I was constructing something meaningful for my future. Even then, difficulties persisted. My schedule was a whirlwind of early classes, afternoon internship work, and evening study sessions or cafe shifts. I had no social life and was perpetually drained. One of my darkest moments occurred when my computer crashed a week before final exams. Unable to afford a replacement, I borrowed an outdated machine from a friend. It was so sluggish that simply loading a document took ages. I recall sitting in the campus library at midnight, attempting to complete an assignment due the following day and completely breaking down. I wanted to rage against the injustice. But then I thought of Sandra and Ian, how they would likely mock my struggles. And that motivated me to persevere. I refused to let them triumph. The lack of support from Sandra and Ian was compounded by their deliberate attempts to humiliate me, particularly in front of others. There's one Thanksgiving dinner that remains etched in my memory. I had recently begun college and hadn't intended to attend, but Mark persuaded me to appear for the sake of appearances. I should have followed my instincts and stayed away. Sandra was hosting, and the table was filled with her friends and several of Ian's business associates. Everything proceeded smoothly until Ian decided to speak up. "So, Amanda," he announced loudly, grinning as he leaned back in his seat, "how's that glamorous academic life treating you? Still brewing coffee and barely getting by." Several guests chuckled uncomfortably, probably uncertain whether he was joking. I felt my face flush, but before I could reply, Sandra added, "Ian, don't be cruel," she said in that artificial, sweet voice she used when trying to appear generous. Amanda is doing her best. Not everyone is naturally suited for success immediately. The way she delivered it, with that slight hesitation before doing her best, made her true opinion crystal clear. Mark served as my lifeline during those years. Regardless of how difficult things became, he was always present to remind me why I was pushing forward. I'd return home from a late shift or the library completely exhausted, and he'd have a meal prepared, even if it was just grilled cheese or leftovers. One particular evening stands out in my memory. I had just failed a crucial exam, and everything seemed to be collapsing. I came home, dropped my bag on the floor, and began crying right there in the entrance. Mark didn't immediately ask what was wrong. He simply embraced me and let me cry until I could speak. When I finally found the words, he said, "Amanda, this single test doesn't define you. You're accomplishing something many people would have abandoned by now. You're permitted to stumble, but you won't fall. You're more resilient than this." Then he prepared hot chocolate and stayed with me until I felt like myself again. It wasn't just his words, it was how he believed in me even when I couldn't believe in myself. Knowing he supported me made all the difference. When I graduated, I felt like I had conquered a mountain. It wasn't merely the diploma itself. It was everything. It represented I had succeeded despite all the obstacles, despite Sandra and Ian's complete absence of support. I didn't invite them to the ceremony. Mark and a few close friends were there, cheering as I walked across the stage. I remember thinking they couldn't steal this moment from me. It was one of the most prideful days of my life. Shortly after graduation, I obtained a position at a medium-sized advertising firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well. And for the first time, I could breathe easier. Mark and I married the following year, and soon after, we discovered I was expecting Lily. It felt like everything was finally falling into place. From Sandra and Ian, I heard nothing. It was as if I didn't exist to them. Advancing in my career wasn't simple, but it felt like a natural extension of the resilience I'd developed during college. I began at the bottom, handling small accounts nobody else wanted. I worked diligently, stayed late, and took on projects outside my job description. Gradually, people began to notice. My supervisor once approached me after a major presentation and said, "Amanda, the way you managed that client, it's like you've been doing this for years. You have a genuine gift for connecting with people." It meant everything to me, but it also stung strangely. Hearing praise from colleagues and managers, people who barely knew me, only emphasized how little I had ever received from my own family. I'd sit in meetings where my boss would praise my work ethic, or I'd overhear coworkers saying things like, "Amanda's a rising star. She's going places," and part of me felt hollow. I kept wondering why Ian couldn't have said something similar, why Sandra couldn't have recognized my value. Instead, all I ever received from them were backhanded remarks or outright dismissal. It was a hollow type of sadness, knowing the approval I'd yearned for as a teenager would never come from them. My life continued progressing, and with each step, I felt like I was finally building something substantial. After several years at the firm, I earned a promotion to account manager, supervising my own team. It felt surreal. Just a few years prior, I was struggling to afford groceries, and now I was sitting in meetings with executives, presenting strategies I had developed. Mark was my greatest supporter throughout it all. When I received the promotion, he surprised me with a small dinner party at home, just us and a few close friends. "You've earned this," he said, raising his glass to toast me. "No one deserves it more." Around the same time, we welcomed Lily into the world. The moment I held her for the first time, everything else disappeared. I remember looking at her tiny face and thinking, I'm going to ensure you always feel loved and supported, no matter what. Being a mother added a completely new dimension of joy and purpose to my life. But while my world was brightening, Sandra and Eon's was beginning to crumble. Eon's grand plans had collapsed. His business failed, and Sandra, who had always prided herself on her social standing, suddenly seemed less confident. Rumors began circulating that they were struggling financially, and Ian had moved back in with Sandra. I'll never forget the day I encountered Ian and Sandra at the grocery store. It had been years since I'd seen either of them, and honestly, I wasn't prepared for how different they appeared. I was in the organic section, selecting some gourmet cheese for a dinner. Mark and I were hosting. Lily was in the cart, babbling about something when I turned the corner and nearly collided with them. Ian was pushing a cart with just a few items, mostly canned goods and a bag of rice, and Sandra was following behind him, looking worn out and older than I'd ever seen her. "Amanda," Sandra said, her voice a mixture of surprise and discomfort. Ian looked up, and his expression hardened when he saw me. I didn't know what to say initially. I was standing there with my cart full of premium groceries, Lily giggling in her seat, while they looked like they were barely making ends meet. Sandra tried to summon her usual fake smile. "You're looking well," she said, her eyes glancing at my cart. Ian just grunted, clearly too proud to say anything. "Yeah, things have been good," I replied casually, not wanting to gloat, but unable to hide the satisfaction I felt. It was a stark contrast to the last time we'd crossed paths at a grocery store, when I was the one struggling and Ian was displaying his success. After that encounter, things shifted. Suddenly, Sandra and Ian were attempting to re-enter my life. It began with small gestures. Sandra calling to check in or sending me awkward messages on social media. "Hi, Amanda. Just wanted to see how you're doing. It's been so long." She never directly mentioned our grocery store meeting, but the timing was too obvious to ignore. Ian wasn't as subtle. He sent me a text shortly after. "Hey sis, we should catch up sometime. I've got some ideas I'd love to discuss with you." Initially, I ignored them. I didn't trust their motives, and honestly, I was still too resentful to consider reconnecting. But they persisted. Sandra began calling Mark under the pretense of being a concerned stepmother, asking about Lily and how we were doing. Mark, being the kind-hearted person he is, told me maybe they're trying to make amends. I wasn't convinced. It felt less like genuine interest and more like they'd observed how well I was doing and wanted to attach themselves to it. Part of me wanted to confront them directly, but another part was curious to see how far they'd go. It was a peaceful Saturday afternoon when I pulled into the driveway and saw Ian and Sandra standing in front of my house. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. They looked out of place, like actors in the wrong scene of a film. Sandra was gripping her purse tightly, her face tense, while Ian stood with his hands in his pockets, looking everywhere except at me. Mark and Lily were at the zoo with his parents, so it was just me. I couldn't accompany them because I had to complete some work at the office for an important Monday meeting. I sighed, already preparing myself for whatever this was, as I stepped out of the car. Sandra's face brightened with that overly rehearsed smile I knew too well. "Amanda, what a coincidence," she said, as if they hadn't been waiting there intentionally. Ian gave me a rigid nod, still avoiding eye contact. "What are you doing here?" I asked directly, not in the mood for small talk. Sandra waved her hand dismissively, like my question was irrelevant. "Oh, we just thought we'd stop by to catch up. It's been too long, don't you think?" I remained silent. Sandra put on her practiced smile, the one she used to soften bad news or manipulate people into compliance. "Amanda, sweetheart, we've been thinking about how proud your father would be of you. You've accomplished so much for yourself. Look at this beautiful house. You've really created something wonderful." I stayed quiet, my arms folded. I wasn't falling for her flattery. After a moment of uncomfortable silence, Ian cleared his throat and finally looked at me. "Yeah, what Sandra is trying to say is we've encountered a bit of a difficult period. Things haven't been easy, difficult period." I asked, narrowing my eyes. "What does that mean exactly?" Sandra looked at Ian as if he had jumped in too quickly. "Oh, it's nothing too serious. Just some financial setbacks. Ian's business didn't quite work out as we hoped, and well, I've had some medical expenses come up recently. We are just, how do I put this, a little short on cash at the moment." And I pressed, already sensing where this was headed. Ian shifted uncomfortably, "And we thought maybe you could help us out. Just a little something to help us get back on our feet. Help you out." I repeated, incredulous, "You're asking me for money." Sandra gave an exaggerated sigh, her fake smile disappearing. "Amanda, you make it sound so harsh. It's not like we're asking for charity just a loan. You're doing so well, and it's clear you can afford it. We wouldn't even be asking if it wasn't really necessary." "Necessary," I echoed, feeling the heat rising in my chest. "You mean like how it was necessary to steal my college fund? Or to tell me I'd never amount to anything? Is this one of those necessities?" Ian's jaw tightened. "That's not fair. Amanda, we did what we thought was best at the time." I let out a sharp laugh. "Best for whom, Ian?" "For you. For Sandra. Certainly not for me." Sandra put a hand to her chest like I'd struck her. "Amanda. Burra. That's ancient history. Can't we just move past that? We're here now, trying to make amends. Doesn't family mean anything to you?" "Family," I shot back, my voice rising. "You mean the same family that abandoned me to fend for myself, that mocked me for struggling through college, that never lifted a finger to help me. You've got some nerve showing up here and throwing the word family around." Ian's face turned red and his calm facade began to crack. "You're not being reasonable. You have everything now. A house, a husband, a great job. We're just asking for a little help. You owe us that much." "Owe you?" I snapped. "I owe you nothing. Everything I have, I built on my own, with no thanks to either of you. And now you think you can just waltz in here and guilt me into giving you money? Not a chance." Sandra's mask of politeness finally slipped. "I can't believe this," she hissed. "After everything we've done for you?" "Done for me?" I interrupted, laughing bitterly. "What exactly have you done for me besides making my life harder at every turn?" Ian lost his temper completely. "You're a selfish, ungrateful brat. We gave you a roof over your head, and this is how you repay us." I stared at them, stunned by their audacity. "Get off my property," I said, my voice cold. "I'm done with this conversation." Sandra's eyes narrowed, and she leaned in, her voice dripping with venom. "You'll regret this, Amanda. One day you'll need us, and we won't be there." I stepped back, opening the door to my house. "Good. I've been doing just fine without you." As I moved toward the door, Sandra let out a bitter laugh. "Fine, Amanda. Stay on your high horse, but don't forget where you came from. You're nothing without that fancy degree, and we're the ones who made sure you had a roof over your head to even get that far. You should be thanking us." Ian chimed in, his voice dripping with spite. "You think you're so much better than us now, don't you? With your perfect little family and your nice house. Don't get too comfortable, Amanda. Life has a way of knocking people like you down a peg." I stopped in my tracks, turning to face them one last time. "You're right. Life does have a way of knocking people down. You should know you're living proof." With that, I stepped inside, closing the door firmly behind me. Even from inside, I could hear Sandra muttering angrily as they walked away. "Ungrateful. After everything we've done for her, she come crawling back one day." But as their voices faded, all I felt was relief. For the first time in years, I truly understood the power of closing a door, literally and figuratively, and this one I knew would stay closed about a year. Later, Mark and I took Lily to an amusement park. It was a gorgeous day, blue skies, laughter everywhere, and the scent of popcorn in the air. Lily was thrilled, pointing at every ride and pleading to go on the roller coasters. We were making our way toward the food stalls when I saw him, Ian. He was emerging from a public restroom, wearing a faded park uniform and carrying a mop and bucket. For a moment, he didn't see us. His head was down, and he looked exhausted. His shoulders slumped. But then, as we got closer, he glanced up and froze. Our eyes met, and in that instant, I could see the recognition and the shame on his face. Before I could say anything, he turned on his heel and walked away, pushing the mop bucket in front of him as fast as he could. His posture was rigid, like he was trying to hold on to some shred of dignity. I just stood there, watching him disappear into the crowd. Mark noticed my pause and looked at me. "Everything okay?" he asked. I nodded slowly, forcing a smile for Lily's sake. "Yeah, let's go find that cotton candy stand." As we left the park that day, I couldn't stop thinking about Ian. Seeing him like that, avoiding me, ashamed, brought back a flood of memories. The insults, the dismissive comments, the years of being treated like I was less than nothing, and Sandra always there to back him up, to twist the knife a little deeper. For so long, I'd carried the weight of their words, letting them make me feel small. But now it felt different. I looked at Mark holding Lily's hand as she chattered about her favorite rides, and I smiled. This was my life now. A loving husband, a bright, beautiful daughter, A career I'd worked so hard to build. Everything I'd achieved, I'd done without them. And the best part, I didn't need their validation anymore. They'd spent years trying to tear me down. But here I was, happy, successful, and surrounded by people who truly loved me. I thought about how Sandra and Ian's lives had unraveled, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of pity, but it didn't last long. They'd made their choices, and they were living the consequences. I'd spent enough time mourning the family I wished I had. Now, I was focused on the family I'd built, the one that mattered. As we walked to the car, Lily tugged on my arm, pulling me into her excitement about the day. I smiled down at her, feeling nothing but gratitude for the life I had now.